Only certain individuals who had the right permissions, who had the right approvals, could deploy to our code to our staging environment. It had to be different than the people developing the code. So our QA engineers are responsible for deploying to those higher environments, and we were able to do that with BuildMaster. I was born and raised here in Portland, Oregon. I work for WebMD Health Services. I'm currently a software architect. My background has been mostly in .NET Windows land and focusing on build automation, release automation, that kind of thing. So we deal with personal identifiable information and personal health information, and so we're regulated by federal law. And so we recently received a high trust certification, which is basically a certification that says, yes, you comply with federal laws around PII and PHI. And so some of the things we needed in our pipelines were the person that wrote the code. Any code that somebody wrote had to be reviewed by somebody else, and that was solved by our source control tool. We have code review requirements turned on in our source control tool, and then only certain individuals who had the right permissions, who had the right approvals, could deploy to our code to our staging environment. It had to be different than the people developing the code. So our QA engineers are responsible for deploying to those higher environments, and we were able to do that with BuildMaster. So the two main features, it had to be, we had to be able to automate it. We have, when developers wanted to be, and still today, they want to be able to spin up new UI apps and new services whenever they need to spin them up. And so we actually have a job in our Jenkins build server where people go and say, okay, I want a new service. And they run this job and it spins up a new service. Well, we needed a tool that could allow us to create a new application in that deployment tool that was all hooked up to a build and to a deployment pipeline. And we also needed better visibility. The tool we were using had no visibility to most of the developers on the floor. When a deployment failed, they couldn't tell why. They had to actually go to someone who had the right permissions. I don't know if it was a problem with the tool or the way it was configured. It was owned by owned by our corporate headquarters, and they managed it. And so I don't know what the problem was, but those were the two main things we needed from a tool. Some of the other tools we solved didn't have APIs that we could automate the creation of these services. But BuildMaster did. The sooner you catch issues, the cheaper they are to fix, right? If you don't catch an issue until it goes to live, it costs a lot more in time and energy and effort to diagnose it, figure it out, and fix it. But if you catch it when you first deploy to dev, like your service doesn't start or it's not running, then it's way cheaper to fix. You can even, if your pipelines are sophisticated enough, you can catch that on a feature branch that your developers are working on, and it never even goes out to more developers because it's been caught early in the development process. I'm focusing on getting the software deployed as fast as possible with as high quality as possible. I'm focused on making sure that we're building the quality in and that we're catching things really early in the process. And I kind of see my job as kind of a coach to help people do the right things, right? And so building those checks in kind of helps people to make sure those checks pass, right? For example, if you have a set of tests that you run against your application during the build process, if the build fails, when those tests fail, people are encouraged to keep those tests passing, right? But if you take them out of the build and they're not part of your deployment process, they may fail and people may go back and make them pass, but because there's no consequences for those tests to fail, people aren't really going to be motivated to get them fixed. And a lot of companies, when they start out, developers are doing all the work, right? They're developing the software and they're also releasing the software. And it's kind of like, in my talk, I likened it to designing a car versus manufacturing a car, which in software, it's easy to do the manufacture, it's easy to do the deployment part of it. Whereas in the real world, with physical things, it's harder to do. And in my view, those are different skill sets and different focuses. Developers are really good at designing things, so let's let them focus on designing their software. Let's let them focus on putting the code together in the best way so that it runs, it's performant, whatever the business requires. And then, but it's a different specialty to get that software delivered out to your environments. You don't want to split attention, right? You don't want your developers to be responsible for not only the app, but also the tools to deliver the app, to deploy it, because one of the other is going to get short shrift, right? They're either going to focus on the deployment to the detriment of your business value, or they're going to focus on the business value and not be able to deliver that as well. But when you have a team focused on the deployment and the building the deployment, they can focus 100% on getting your software delivered really quickly, or as quickly as your business needs or can support. And just like when you're designing and manufacturing cars, you have to work together. When you design a car with how it gets manufactured and vice versa, when you are focused on the building and the automation of your software and deploying it, you have to work closely with the developers because you have to know what they're building, what technologies it's using, how it gets configured. You still have to work closely together, but having a team focused on that pipeline makes the pipeline much more easier to maintain, to understand, and it helps build quality in and make your software better. When we deploy our software, when I first got there, the only really testing we did when we deployed it was manual regression testing. We deployed it and people manually regression tested. Well, when we rolled out our services, not our UI apps, not so much, and when we moved our monolith into BuildMaster, we integrated some small health checks into that as our team did. The development team wasn't asking for it. Nobody asked for it. We just built it in as a check, as a sanity check that, hey, did the deploy work? And we ran these health checks against the applications to make sure they got deployed quickly and easily. It depends a lot on your culture and who you've got on your teams and what they're focused on. Some developers are really focused on quality and they want to build quality in, and some developers just want to develop their code and get it deployed out and they want to focus on the business value that they're bringing. When you have a team dedicated to your deployment process, they can focus on building that quality in, and they can focus on making sure that your pipeline has the necessary steps and checks that encourage people to build that quality in by running automated tests and making sure that you're running automated tests, making sure that you're running a smoke test after you deploy. Being on a team that's dedicated to that, I have the flexibility to say, no, we're gonna do some health checks here. We're gonna make sure that when we deploy something, it's running, it's working.